Alright, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be looking at the use of color in general, but also particularly to do with our concept artwork. So what we have in front of us here is a color wheel, and the color wheel is made up of numerous colors originating from our primary colors, which are red, yellow and blue, and moving on into the secondary colors, your orange, your purples and your greens. And then we also have secondary variations of those secondary colors. Some people would say that they're tertiary colors, but it's argued that brown is the only tertiary color, as it is an equal combination of all of our secondary colors. So that's just a thing for you there to know. But this is a color wheel. On the left side of our color wheel here, we've got our cool colors, so our blues, our greens, which would make up a cooler color palette. And on the right side of that, we have our warmer colors. So cool and warm makes sense. If you're going to be doing a piece with more of a cool overtone or a colder overtone, then you would be going with more blues and greens. And if you're going to go with a warmer color palette, then you're going to be going with more yellows, oranges and reds. So we're going to also discuss color palettes in terms of our artwork and how we can use color harmoniously within our artwork. We're going to look at 3 different types of color palettes, which are monochromatic, analogous and complementary. So we're going to start off with monochromatic because that is the easiest one to get our heads around. Monochromatic is when we color our image using one color, so variations of that hue. So we could adjust the saturation of that hue. So the hue is just another word for color. The saturation is the intensity of the color. So if you have an image which is completely desaturated, then you've got a black and white image, which is in itself a monochromatic image. Right, so you've got a completely black and white image if you've got a desaturated color palette. Okay, so here we have got variations of that color palette, which is a monochromatic palette. So if we were to go here and select, say, purple, then we can see we've got different variations of purple. And if we were then to bring it close to the center of the color wheel, then we can see that it then becomes less saturated. See, so we're starting to lose the strength of the color as we move towards the center of our color wheel. Very easy to get your head around. That's why we're starting off with that, because it is just simply one color. Moving on to the analogous color palette. The analogous color palette is when you use usually like 3 colors, but here we've got 5 examples of colors which are adjacent, which means they're right next to each other on the color wheel. Again, it's very easy to create a nice harmonious piece of artwork based on this color palette, simply because they do sit right next to each other on the color wheel. Again, we can adjust that by decreasing the saturation, but as you can see, it's very easy. And if you look at the bar beneath the wheel itself, you get a nice flow from one color to the other. The third color palette that we're going to look at is our complementary color palette. Now this is where it gets a little more technical. With a complementary color palette, you need to be very careful with the amount of color that you use on your image. The basic premise of a complementary color palette is that you select one color as your primary color. So for example, green. We then choose the opposite color on the color wheel, which in this instance is red, and we use that as a complementary color for our piece. Now the purpose of this complementary color is to help guide the viewer's eye to where we want it to go. Now it's important that you don't use it split right down the middle, so you don't use 50% green and 50% red, because what you'll in essence have is a conflicting piece of artwork. So the person viewing it won't really know where to look. The image itself won't have harmony. It will be fighting for attention, and you'll just end up irritating your viewer. So what you need to do is have one color, which is going to be your dominant color, which is going to be set to about 90-95% of the image. So the image is going to be colored at roughly 90-95% of that color and variations of that color, and then a very small percentage, maybe 5% to 10% maximum, using the complementary color, which will help to guide the viewer's eye to the focal point where you want them to be looking. Alright, so that's just a basic premise of color, warm and cool colors, and using different color palettes within your artwork. All of the other things that we've learned still apply. So your composition, your tonal values, all of that still applies. That isn't separate or independent of the use of color. They all work together for you to create a harmonious piece of artwork. So keep that in mind.